Hi friends, today I'll be giving you my top tips for passing FRCPath Part 1. I'll be talking about the price and duration of the exam, how the exam is delivered, what to expect from the exam, how the questions are set, and then finally give you my 10 top tips 10 top tips for passing this exam from your first attempt.
Wow, really?
So my name is Sultan and I've recently passed my FRCPath Part 1 from my first attempt. I've studied over a period of 6 months and it was a comfortable time for me. I was able to travel, have my family over for a few weeks and still not feel too pressured while preparing for the exam. By the end of this video, I hopefully would have answered all of your questions in regard to the FRCPath Part 1 exam. So let's get to it. First point is the duration and price. The exam is a 3 hours exam and it's usually delivered twice a year, once around the springtime and once around the autumn time. You can go to the Royal College official website where they usually update the timeline. So it's a 3 hours exam and there are 125 questions. It's a single best answer question, MCQs and EMQs. So MCQ essentially is a multiple choice question where you're given a question with 5 options and you choose one. EMQs is an extended matching question where they give you approximately 12 options and then they deliver 5 questions below that. Then you get to choose one of the answers for each question. And I've noticed that at the end of the exam, when they deliver the results, although the exam is 125 questions, sometimes they remove a few questions, approximately like 3 or 4 questions, when they detect that there is a mistake in the question or a spelling error that might have confused some candidates. The FRCPath Part 1 is priced at £707. This was the latest price, this is what I paid, but prices could possibly change in the future. How is the exam delivered? Well, the exam used to be in person, but after the COVID pandemic, they shifted to an online delivery. And I know that many people are very skeptical with online exams. However, I think the process went relatively smoothly. The drawbacks are that you're gonna have to rely on your own laptop, your own internet, and you're kind of responsible to maintain a good connection. And I know that some people doing the exam abroad might find it a bit more challenging than others. As you know, the internet reliability all around the world is not equal. So they use a platform called TestReach. I mean, these platforms can change, but that's the platform they are using at the moment. You're given all the information through email a few weeks before the exam, well ahead of before the exam, and you get to also test the platform on your device before starting the exam. So don't stress too much about it because there's a lot of support to ensure that you're able to sit the exam on your device. During the exam, there will be different groups of candidates. You are not aware of those groups, but you are divided into different groups, and each group will have what's so-called an invigilator or a coordinator. That person will have access to your camera, your screen, so that you're gonna screen share as well, your microphone, and basically everything on your laptop will be monitored. So before the exam starts, he will ask to confirm your ID. He will ask you to take the laptop around the room to check if you're hiding any study material. And they will also ask you to remove any mirrors in the room. So I had a standing mirror which I had to essentially remove from the room. You will be allowed to take breaks, although you will have to inform the invigilator through the chat box. Yes, and there is as well a chat box to ask for help if you need it during the exam. They're fairly easily reached. And finally, if you do lose connection in the exam, they will pause the exam momentarily so that you don't end up wasting a lot of time. So what should you expect out of this exam? Is the exam really hard? How are the questions chosen? I think it's all about how you prepare for the exam. If you haven't started studying yet and you need a plan to study, please do watch my video where I talk about how I passed my exam for my first attempt and I give my 5-step study guide. So the difficulty of the exam essentially relies on how well you prepared. And it's not just about how much you've studied, it's about what you studied and how you covered the curriculum. My tip is that you should glimpse at least once over the histopathology syllabus and curriculum. Don't spend too much time reading that document. None of that is going to be asked in the exam. But the syllabus particularly will give you an idea of what the college is really interested in. It will give you each system and which topics in that system is of particular interest so that you can at least read around these organs or conditions. So what many people don't know is that the questions are based on the curriculum. There's no such thing as, oh, this exam was skin heavy or GI heavy. I do hear a lot of the time where people come out of the exam and they say, oh my goodness, the exam is bone pathology heavy or skin pathology heavy. I can understand why they've said that, but actually how the college views questions is that, let's say for example, let's say if the question was about a lymph node and then they ask you which immunohistochemistry will aid a certain diagnosis, and then they give you a list of immunos. So this question is not a lymph node question, it's actually an immunohistochemistry question. Same thing if you get a skin biopsy and they ask you, what do you expect on immunofluorescence? So this question is about immunofluorescence. It's not about skin particularly. So that's how the college views these questions. Whereas I understand many people will look at this question and they're like, oh my goodness, that's a skin question. So each question in the exam must address certain part of the curriculum. It cannot be just a random question with no value behind or completely out of the curriculum. So if you want to get an idea of how questions are set, please do sign up for our upcoming question bank using the link in the description below, and it will be following the FRCPath curriculum and syllabus. So please do sign up to be one of the first few to know about this MCQ bank once it's out. So finally, my main 10 tips to pass this exam. Tip number 1, leave enough time to study. I cannot stress how important this is. Please do leave enough time to study. It took me 6 months to study for the exam. I was able to fit in a trip, a visit to my family, and I was very comfortable during that period. But you know yourself best. I know people who only left 3 months to study for the exam and they still managed to pass. It's just different people need different amount of time. It's always better to overestimate. So leave plenty of time. 6 months is my recommended duration. Tip number 2, there are no negative markings. Answer all the questions. Do not leave any question unanswered. Third point, read the question fully. I've been told by many of my colleagues that a lot of the time when they get a question wrong, it's not because they don't know the answer, it's because they read the first few lines and then they assume that they understood the point of the question. And usually the main question is actually the last line of that question stem. So please read the question fully. Once you read the question properly, the answer is going to come to you and you're going to choose the answer much faster. Tip number 4. There are no trick questions. All the questions are relevant. Everything in the question stem has relevance. If they say a 40-year-old diabetic male, diabetes have to do with the patient's diagnosis. They wouldn't just throw random information. At least what I've noticed in the exams that they always put relevant information. Tip number 5, learn your buzzwords or keywords. In many organ systems, certain pathologies have very characteristic findings. Certain keywords are important because many times they will use that word to refer to that particular pathology. So let's say, for example, if they say starry sky appearance, then you should automatically think about Burkitt's lymphoma, and they do bring that very often in the exam. Or if they say, for example, chicken wire vasculature or chicken wire appearance, that's a very common way to describe myxoid liposarcoma.
I've never heard of this thing.
Tip number 6, they almost always avoid gray zones in pathology. Just like how many consultants differ about melanomas, for example, they will not ask a question that falls in that gray zone. All the questions are going to be textbook, classical presentations, or in areas where there is not much inter-observer variability. If you read a topic and you think, oh my goodness, this overlaps with so many other things, the chances are they're not going to ask you that. If you look at skin, for example, lichen planus has a very clear clinical presentation and quite distinct microscopic features. Just like pemphigus vulgaris has a tombstone appearance that's quite very distinct. Things like that, things that are very distinct and very classical, are usually asked in the exams. I do put most of these questions in our question bank, so make sure you do register to my question bank in the link below. Tip number 7, pace yourself. It is a long exam. Do not try to rush the exam, and do not spend too much time in one question. If you feel like you're spending a lot of time in the question, just choose your first impression, flag that question. You can flag questions during the exam for easy revision, and then go to the next question. Do not spend a lot of time. Tip number 8, EMQs take a lot of time and they're usually situated at the end of the exam, whereas MCQs are a bit faster. So if you spend a lot of time answering your MCQs in the beginning, you will notice yourself struggling in the EMQ portion at the end of the exam, which actually takes a little bit more time than I expected. Tip number 9, very important in my opinion, sleep very well before your exam, get enough rest, do not stay late the night before, have a good breakfast, a nice cup of coffee when you wake up, try to keep your energy levels to the max. And finally, tip number 10, I think that you should not study on the day of your exam, and definitely not study new material a day before the exam, because chances are you might not even retain it. The day of the exam and the day before should be a relaxing day. You can just like review tables or certain TNMs that you want to refresh on, but do not study new material, do not overwhelm yourself. Whatever information you have at that point should be enough for you to get through the exam. If there is anything that was not covered in this video, or if you have any further questions, please do leave your questions down below and I'll answer them as soon as possible. Once again, if you do like this kind of content, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and stay in tune for my upcoming videos.